This is a chapter a day, and this is the book Here If You Need Me by Kate Braestrup. Today we're reading chapter 15. Disregard, the Augusta dispatcher advised with relief in her voice over the radio, canceling my next call out. The first trooper on scene had swiftly located the missing toddler. The toddler was in the backyard, tangled in the dog's chain, hysterical but unhurt. No one was dead. I could turn my car around and go home. Thanks be to God. Is your job dangerous? Ellie asked me. Of course not, Ellie Belly, I said. Then why do you have to wear a bulletproof vest? Ellie had claimed the middle of my bed. It was, she explained, the only quiet place in the house in which to do her math homework. Naturally, her brother followed her into my room, having discovered in himself a sudden yen for maternal wisdom. Did I have any suggestions about what to name his new rock group? How about redundant male? Ellie offered. Peter had been about to retort in kind when I pulled the vest out of my gear bag. That distracted them both. That is so unbelievably way cool, Peter said. Can I wear it to school? I pressed the front Kevlar panel to my chest and adjusted the Velcro straps around my bosom and flab. No, Peter, I said. It's not actually a bulletproof vest, Ellie. What would you call it then? Edna, in supply, had informed me that she prefers ballistic vest or body armor, because the vest won't stop rounds from certain kinds of weapons. So it isn't really accurate to call it bulletproof, Edna said, and of course an edged weapon can penetrate Kevlar, she warned. That's why there's this steel plate supplement over the area of the heart. A discourse on the limitations of miracle fibers was not what Ellie was asking for. My daughter is calm and smart, which often makes her seem older than she is. But she was only 13, and she had already lost one parent. It would not comfort her to know that the federal government has declared law enforcement chaplains eligible for federal death benefits should they die on the job, or that the wardens have pledged to stuff me into my uniform and drag my body into the woods should ill health or my own poor judgment lead me to die 10-7, off duty. It's called body armor, honey. Chaplains organizations now recommend that all law enforcement chaplains be issued a vest. So, Colonel Santaguida gave me this one. It's a used vest, I assured her, as if that made a difference. It used to be Cheryl Barden's before she retired, and it's not like I have to actually wear it much. In fact, I can't wear it for the most part. My torso is a tool of my trade, after all. People hug me. My body has to be soft and squishy. Can I try it on? Peter asked again. And try stabbing myself? No. I took off the vest and stuffed it into one of the several large canvas bags I used to organize my gear. I covered it with the fleece sweater I also inherited from Cheryl. The vest will almost certainly remain there, unused, ready to be handed on to the next chaplain who comes along, provided she's a female and a size 6'8". It's important to get a proper fit around the armpits, Edna had said. If you leave gaps, the bullet could get in there and wind up banging around inside of you, and you don't want that. It's a woman's vest, I told Peter. It wouldn't fit you properly. It seems ridiculous to have this vest, and just as ridiculous to pretend it's something other than it is. It feels like just so much melodrama. My job really isn't dangerous, at least not in the sense that I'm likely to be exposed to small arms fire. I resisted the notion that a chaplain should wear body armor until Warden Mike Pierre told me about a dicey death notification he'd participated in a few years before I came on the job. The victim had been shot while hunting with a large group of friends and was rushed to the hospital in critical condition. His friends repaired to their hunting camp to blunt the edge of their distress with large doses of coffee, brandy. Hours later, Mike was sent to the hunting camp to inform these well-armed, very drunk men, not only that the victim had died, but also that the bullet that killed him had come from his best friend's gun. Had I been the chaplain at the time, I would have gone with Mike to do the notification. I would have felt a lot more comfortable having you with me if you'd had a vest on, Mike said, just in case. If it makes the wardens happy, I'll do it, I told myself resignedly. Still, the most dangerous thing I do as a chaplain is also the most dangerous thing Mike does as a game warden. Statistically speaking, it was the most dangerous thing Drew ever did as a state trooper, and is doubtless the most dangerous thing you do. We drive. I am on the road at all hours of the day and night. Sometimes I drive while distracted, adrenalized, or exhausted. Occasionally I am a passenger in a pickup truck going 80 or 90 miles an hour along narrow roads. Even with blue lights and a wailing siren, it's dangerous. Why don't these people get out of the way? I asked Warden Nate Robertson one afternoon. Don't they know they're supposed to yield to emergency vehicles? Nate shrugged. Recently promoted, he was too busy considering the manifold responsibilities awaiting him at the scene to bother commenting on such a commonplace irritant. The call had come in as a swimming accident. 2 bathers had gone over a waterfall at a state park, splashing down in a deep, rock-studded gorge. One was dead at the scene, the other was badly injured. They're still in the water, the dispatcher said. That doesn't sound good, Nate replied. 2123, Skowhegan FD is on scene. 2151 wants to know if you want 1056. Nate considered for a moment. 2123, Augusta. If 2151 thinks we need a helicopter from the National Guard to extract, we should go ahead and make the request. 10-3, 10-4. Nate inhaled and exhaled long and forcefully, puffing his cheeks. All the wardens seem to do this when they are in a state of heightened tension. I've caught myself doing it, a deep breath and a good long blow in stressful circumstances. In my case, it's usually while I'm waiting to preside over a particularly sorrowful funeral. May the words of my mouth and the meditations of my heart be acceptable to you, my Lord and my God. I'm never anxious enough to puff this way when I'm on an airboat skidding sideways across the surface of a river, or when I'm in the warden's service airplane as it skis to a landing on a frozen lake. And maybe I'm too stupid to huff and blow, too dumb to know how much danger I'm in as we drive, lights flashing, siren blaring over the winding, hilly roads of Maine. I, of all people, should know that. Nate and I made it to the state park in one piece. He pulled a backpack from his rear seat and checked to be sure he had what he needed. Flashlights, flares, ropes, an extra Leatherman tool, first aid kit, protein bars, the policies and procedures manual, various forms, useful phone numbers, an extra cell phone battery, a water bottle. I had my mini Bibles in my pocket and a Kleenex. I was good to go. We hiked 1.5 miles through the woods. A sibilant, watery whisper rose to thunder as we drew near, and the warm air by the river was thick with moisture. Mosquitoes gathered in blissful throngs. I bummed some insect repellent from Nate. It's organic, he warned. We'll have to slap it on again in 15 minutes. Several wardens were already there, and a local fire department had deployed something their chief proudly described as a vertical descent alpine rescue team. It's a new thing for us, the chief told me. Because of all the ski resorts around here, we got a grant for the equipment and the training. When a skier goes flying off into a gully, we've got what we need to pull him out. 5 buff firefighters were busy arranging a complex web of ropes and pulleys on a patch of level ground. Lines extended from the rope web and disappeared over the fern-fringed edge of the chasm. Some teenage swimmers were standing around rubbernecking, so a warden mustered them into pulling teams. The fire chief winced when the teenagers touched the ropes. We're still new at this, he explained. This is the first time we've done a vertical rescue for real. I don't mind telling you, I'm glad somebody's here to pray for us. Your people look like they know what they're doing, I said encouragingly. They've been chomping at the bit, hoping for a chance to try it all out, the fire chief said. They're good boys. They train hard. I want it all to go right for them. And for that poor lady down there too, of course, he added hastily. Is the body of the other victim still down there? Still there. He'll have to wait. He can't get any more dead than he is right now. And the lady is supposed to meet the life flight helicopter at that field opposite the park entrance. Do you know what her injuries are? No, she's pretty well buggered up. The climber down there with her says compound fracture one arm, probably at least one broken leg, maybe a broken pelvis. I don't know what else. Go over a waterfall and you're not going to go dancing that night. I suppose not. How did she manage not to drown? One witness said he saw the guy holding her head out of the water. If that's the case, I don't know how he managed. He was bleeding out. I mean, that water was all red, even with the current moving it on downstream. Hey, geez, do you know if any of your guys have an ATV with them? Adam, that tall guy there, has one on the back of his truck. But isn't the National Guard helicopter coming? Yes, but their ETA is over an hour. This lady isn't going to want to wait that long, and it's 2 miles to the park entrance. Some rough ground there, and I'm thinking realistically we can't carry her that far. The chief went off to consult with the warden. When I give you the signal, you pull on this rope here, Warden Adam Kelly was explaining to the teenagers. You don't pull on any other ropes, just this one. Got it? The kids nodded nervously, twiddling the rope between their fingers. One boy's fashionably low-slung surf shorts revealed a large green cannabis leaf tattooed on his left ass cheek. Pull hard, the warden said, but not till I tell you. The teenager's eyes were glued to the edge of the gorge where a couple of firefighters crouched among lush ferns, bright orange safety lines anchoring them to nearby trees. They leaned out into the abyss, into the fine spray thrown up by the waterfall, and shouted and signed to an unseen rescuer below. Okay, pull, one of the firefighters called from the edge. Pull, boys, the chief roared. The teenagers braced their flip-flops in the mud and pulled. The ropes twined and whirred. Game wardens and firefighters joined the teams, and in no time the green ferns parted to reveal the bright orange bottom of a stiff fiberglass stretcher tipping up over the lip of the gorge. It was accompanied by a climber in a red helmet. Hold, the chief commanded. Good job, men, good job. Hold it there. The climber made a few adjustments to the ropes. The woman on the stretcher, still hanging nearly vertically in her plastic bed, gave an audible yelp, and the climber smiled at her. Atta girl, Mona, he said, you're almost there. Another heave, and the stretcher, its occupant trussed up as thoroughly as a Lakota papoose, came to rest on level ground. The injured woman endured a brief examination by a paramedic. Then 6 sweaty men bore her away, up a rise toward the main trail where the warden's ATV waited. Somehow, don't ask me how, The stretcher was bound with ropes and bungee cords to the ATV, which then jostled and bumped over the rough trails to a little dirt road, where Mona was transferred to the bed of a warden's pickup truck and driven to the park entrance. There, she was transferred again, this time to the Life Flight helicopter, which flew her to a hospital in Lewiston. Extracting the dead man was a somewhat different process. Though he remained in the water while the complex logistics of evacuating the living were enacted, he didn't get any more dead, just as the chief had predicted. Eventually, buoyed with extra life jackets, the body was maneuvered downstream through the rapids to a place where the high, steep cliff walls gave way to a more moderate sloping bank. The rope web was redeployed, and the body was hauled out. It was examined both for cause of death, large open wound on right side, complete exsanguination, and for identifying marks. His face was compared to the driver's license found with the clothing and wallets on shore. Face and photo matched. The dead man's name was Fred Shelensky, and he was from Billerica, Massachusetts. It was just as well that the National Guard helicopter was already in the air and en route. The day was getting on, and it would have been very difficult to carry the body over land before darkness fell. "Our chaplain's going to say a prayer," Nate announced. He took off his cap. The wardens bowed their heads, and the assembled firefighters, teenagers, and paramedics glanced shyly at one another, then followed suit, their hands folded in front of their climbing harnesses, sweat-stained t-shirts, and bare chests. I knelt in the mud beside the plastic stretcher and laid a suddenly tender hand on the dead man's head. "Receive and bless the spirit of this man, Fred Shelensky, as the waters have received his blood, as the earth will receive his body. Bless the sorrowing hearts of those who love him. Lend skill and strength to the hands of those who would heal his friend Mona. Amen." "Amen," the assembled chorus. "It was nice," the boy with the pot leaf on his butt told me. But Nate was already shooing him off with the others. "Appreciate it, buddy, but you need to get moving. I need all non-essential personnel out of here by the time the chopper arrives." I couldn't claim to be essential, but Nate was my ride home, so I stayed. Nate dismissed all but a half-dozen game wardens, then insisted that only he remain with the corpse to greet the chopper. Everyone else was ordered to withdraw to what he considered a safe distance. "Like down there," he said, pointing down the trail. No, farther down," he shouted when we hadn't gone far enough. "And clear the area." I had been on hand on other occasions when the National Guard lent assistance to Warden Service ground searches, and while a Black Hawk is a large and impressively loud aircraft, I had never felt personally threatened by one flying over the command post or landing in a nearby field. "Do we really need to move stuff this large?" I panted, setting down my portion of a heavy spare stretcher. My partner, a young warden, rolled his eyes. "Nate's become a granny since he got promoted," he muttered. We could hear the distant whoop, whoop, whoop of the approaching helicopter. Still, the Warden Service is not a democracy. Because the sergeant said so, the wardens and I moved backpacks, water bottles, ropes, a rock hammer, and other stray bits of loose equipment down the trail, while the whoop, whoop, whoop got louder. A stiff breeze began to move through the forest, and the stout tree trunks creaked alarmingly. Little rocks stirred around my boots. Up the trail, Nate crouched alone beside the stretcher. He peered intently skyward through the flailing branches. An overlooked water bottle, half empty, took up the air and flew past his face. Whoop, 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 whoop. You know those videos they show on the Weather Channel? The ones of Category 4 hurricanes making landfall? That's what being in the woods under the downwash of a Black Hawk is like. As the helicopter descends, thick pines bend double, and a strong young game warden finds he can barely keep his feet. He turns to his chaplain, wide-eyed and chastened, and shouts, "Maybe we should move a little farther away?" So we do. When we look back, the splintered trunk of a large birch is lying across the trail where we had just been standing. "Is your job dangerous?" Ellie had asked me, her pencil poised above her algebra. "I think Bulletproof would be a good name for a rock band," Peter mused. A spidery thread emerged from the aircraft's belly. A metal basket stretcher attached to the end of the thread rotated slowly downward, followed by a soldier dangling casually from his own line. The young warden explained that if I was ever in a position to receive a metal basket stretcher from a helicopter, I should let the basket hit the ground before I touch it. Apparently, a static charge builds up from the rotors, and if you touch the metal, you are electrocuted. I put my hands behind my back as if to shield them from temptation. Watching nervously, I expected the charged basket to spark or judder when it met the mud, but it touched down with no more force or fanfare than a bread basket being placed on a dinner table. Whatever energy exchanged between it and earth did so discreetly. In moments, the soldier landed lightly, too, unclipping himself from his harness and greeting Nate with a cheerful smile. He was skinny and blond. He looked very young and reminded me of Zach. He released the tether from the basket stretcher, and the helicopter moved off to relieve us of the downwash while the body was transferred. The woods seemed comically quiet, the thunder of a waterfall a mere murmur compared to the Black Hawk's rotors. "Wow, Nate," I said as we bent to lift the body. "That chopper is really something, isn't it?" Nate's hat had vanished, and his cowlicks were all blown flat, making him look uncharacteristically well-groomed. "The chopper is unreal," I continued. Nate grinned at me, then his soft brown gaze suddenly sharpened. "Hey," he snapped, "blood-borne diseases." I was touching the body, gripping the bloody shirt with bare hands. "Gloves," Nate reminded me. I said, "Sorry, Sergeant," humbly, and put mine on. Fred Shalensky's body was pale and heavy, still soggy from the river. The gash on his right side gaped a little as we moved him, showing a solidifying edge of yellow fat, a brief gleam of gut, but no blood. There was no more blood. What remained of Mr. Shalensky was wrapped in a body bag and strapped for his ascent. The soldier radioed that all was ready, and this time the sergeant didn't need to urge a retreat. All non-essential personnel skedaddled. The Black Hawk returned, thrashing the forest. The body left the earth and was lifted skyward. The soldier, again clipped to his long umbilical, followed. Even at a distance, his thin frame appeared relaxed as he ascended, one hand on the cord, the other resting on his harness tip. His blond head turned as he took in the view. 2 hours later, my eyes still red and gritty from the flying duff, my hair full of bark, my boots dropping mud on the clean linoleum of Central Maine Medical Center's ICU, I told Mona that her boyfriend didn't make it, that Fred was dead. Immobilized now by a cervical collar, intravenous lines, and painkillers, by the various pulleys that held her in traction, the casts on her left arm and right leg, and the steel bracing that kept her from further injuring her broken pelvis, Mona began to weep. "It's my fault," she said. Well, Ellie, I mused on the way home, I suppose that on this single day I might have been squashed by a flying birch tree, picked up hepatitis, or been infected with the iatrogenic streptococcus, doubtless incubating all over the ICU. Or an inattentive driver, there are plenty of those, might have swerved in front of Nate's truck as we tore from one side of the state to the other. In fact, I might have fallen asleep at the wheel as I drove home from Lewiston at 4 o'clock in the morning. "Mom, dude," Peter's message on my voicemail said. "Barbed wire catheter. What do you think of that name?" I guess my job does involve a not infrequent exposure to peculiar hazards. None of these could be eliminated by the ballistic vest now stored in the bowels of my gear bag. I could have admitted this to my daughter. Instead, I promised her airily and easily and probably truthfully that I wouldn't get shot. "I don't really deal with criminals anyway," I told Ellie. "Just game wardens and victims of accidents." "Of course it isn't your fault, honey," I reassured Mona. "How could it be?" "It might have been murder," Fritz Trisdell informed me the next day. "I kid you not, Reverend Mother. We're turning the whole case over to the detectives at the Criminal Investigations Division. Mona told Nate when he interviewed her this morning that they went in the water for a cool dip. Said she got into trouble, was getting swept over the falls by the current, and Hero Fred tried to save her." And that's her story, Reverend Mother. But did you take a look at the area above the falls? That isn't a place anybody would think to swim, even if they were stoned or drunk, which Fred and Mona friggin' well were. Which, stoned or drunk? She admitted straight out they'd been drinking. Then she kept asking Nate whether they'd found her purse, whether anybody had looked in her purse. Finally, Nate told her, "Yeah, we looked on the purse. We inventoried your cash. You have $126.14 in an envelope in the hospital safe. And lady, I personally threw your Jeasley nickel bag in the dumpster." "Huh," I said thoughtfully. Of course, he said it in a professional manner. It's not like we're going to summons her for possession after all of this. But then we come to find out that the Billerica PD is on very familiar terms with Fred and Mona. Drug stuff. Receiving stolen property, aggravated assault. I mean, seriously, Kate, this pair had history. I pictured Mona's tears trickling down her temples, soaking into her hair. How achingly pitiable she had been, trying to cry while prone, immobilized under the bright lights and video monitors of the ICU. "Oh, Lieutenant," I said, "what a bummer." "I'll tell you what. So now we're thinking maybe they drank and smoked themselves stupid, got into a fight. She goes out into the water by the falls, saying she's going to throw herself over the edge. He gets out there to yank her back. She grabs onto him and slips or jumps, or maybe he dragged her out there himself and was going to chuck her off. Or maybe, what the hell, they made a pact and both jumped together, hand in hand. Who knows? But CID is treating this as a suspicious death, which is nice for Nate. They can do the paperwork." So I called the guy's family this morning to tell them I'm sorry, I have some bad news, and so on and so forth. They didn't seem too broke up. After a lot of backing and forthing, Fred's brother gave me the number for their local funeral parlor, but the undertaker won't take the case. Says he won't let Fred's body in the door till the family comes by and pays what they already owe him for embalming dear old Auntie Bernice. Are you laughing, Reverend Mother? I was, actually, in spite of myself. In cash, the guy said, because the Shalensky's checks are pure rubber. Pure rubber. The lieutenant and I were both laughing now, the way one might as well laugh at awful things. Poor Shalensky's and poor Mona. Well, you have to say that, I guess, being a religious and all. Bunch of oxygen thieves, if you ask me. For these people, my guys risk their necks. And while we're on the subject, Your Holiness, I heard you were out there in the woods when the helicopter came for the body. Do we need to issue you a helmet? Sure, I thought, scratching the mosquito bite behind my ear. A helmet, a bulletproof, ballistic vest, purple puncture-resistant gloves, a hepatitis vaccine. Maybe some goggles, I said. My eyelashes are still full of bark chips. Receive his spirit as the water has received his blood, as the earth shall receive his body. Would I have asked something else of God if I had known for sure that Fred had tried to murder Mona or been murdered by her? Or if indeed they had clumsily conspired to end their unhappy story in mutual murder? Such a terrible, frightening day, I had said to Mona, stroking her hair, wiping her nose with my Kleenex, wanting so much to offer her at least the meager shelter of an embrace. It's all right to be sad, I told her. You're safe now. It's my fault, she said. No, I soothed her. But maybe it truly was her fault. Fred was dead. His body would lie unclaimed until someone ponied up the price of its disposal. Mona would go home to Billerica, where her arm would eventually be amputated at the elbow. Owing to her drug use, psychological instability, and physical incapacity, her daughter, who might or might not have been Fred's child, would be taken from her by the state. The sun does rise upon the evil and the good, and the rain falls also on the just and the unjust. Matthew 5. I wish I had stayed longer by Mona's bedside that night in the ICU, stroking her hair. I wish I had listened more attentively to what she was trying to tell me, for it might have been the truth. As it was, I wiped her nose unknowing, too easily imagining that I had helped bring her, innocent, to safety. That's the end of chapter 15.